Chapter 6, August 1941. The train to London was as beautiful as it had been when she had travelled north with Bill Sterling. Though she knew it was temporary, Josephine also had been absorbed into the place, otherworldly, sight-touched. Dudley Clark had come north to collect her perfunctory handover, and she left with a small case containing the only other set of clothes she owned that she wasn't wearing. And she walked to the station at the Bridge of Allen across the fields and next to the main Stirling to Inverness Road with him, to catch the evening train to Edinburgh. "Tell me about the sisterhood," he asked as he closed the compartment door. A man in a flat cap attempted to join them, but Clark held up a hand and glared at the man until he got the message. "Our constitution prohibited members from doing any kind of work for the English enemy," Josephine explained. "Women refused to cook or clean for any English houses. Shopkeepers would not serve English wives. No coal or meat would come in deliveries. Mrs. English would go to the shop and, they would pretend they never had the order, or speak in the Irish until she went away." "Not very violent, then," Clark observed. "And Michael? You married him when you were very young." "I was 16. Josephine replied. "I met him in the Republican Army." Ethan disapproved, "But I loved him." "Some of them, the women," Josephine continued, going back to the subject of the Khmer ban, traveled to the US and Europe to highlight the increasingly desperate conditions in Ireland, and let them know the English were starving us. Ethan organized resistance and subterfuge. Women were less likely to be searched or arrested, and could pass unnoticed collecting information. "Nobody notices the cleaner." Josephine sighed, and watched the Highlands give way to more villages and a few towns. Kathleen Shanahan, she went to a restaurant on Parkgate Street in Dublin, acting as a waitress. A lot of the clientele were members of the Crown forces from whom she was able to elicit valuable information for the Dublin Brigade. The grocer's shop in Upper Dorset Street was run by her sister-in-law Kathleen Clark of the Central Branch, and the newsagents in Cork was run by the Wallace sisters. We met there, often, though we never planned too far in advance. The Republican Army came too, and tried to tell us what to do. We tolerated them, and did our own thing. Men like to talk and make decisions, Josephine added, narrowing her eyes to Dudley Clark. "They were all related?" "Kathleen and Kathleen?" "The Wallaces?" Josephine shook her head. "We called ourselves the Deifiae tilde superscripto Ratchers, the sisterhood. If an Irish woman was in difficulty, if oppressed, we would assist. We would fight the English to get them out." "Yet your mother was English." "My father was Irish," Josephine pointed out. "From Mayo." "My Joyce father, at least, though I didn't know him. I only remember my real mother a little bit. She was proud of what the servants of Boycott did. She would have approved of the Khmer ban. Yet, she called on your real father's doorstep one night, and left you," he pointed out. "Some of the women moved even closer to the military front lines, scouting, ambushing, or blocking roads," Josephine continued, refusing to respond to Clark's comment. "We got hold of arms and ammunition, and the Republican Army a broken bar. They knew what we had was valuable." "Michael, Josephine stopped, and looked out of the window. The day Sarah O'Brien came with the news. Living, real, there, right there. Broken bar. ... I'm so sorry, Josephine. A broken bar." "He would come to Cork, or across to Dublin, wherever we were." He smiled so sweetly, Josephine recalled, facing the beautiful scenery. "Such the bonniest boy." She turned back to look at Dudley Clark. Beg had a whole cache of arms at her own house. Whoever would have thought 24 rifles in the cellar of a terraced house? Eileen McGillicuddy even had a secret room for hiding arms and facilitating meetings of the local Republican members. "We conveyed guns and ammunition from GHQ to the regional brigades and to and from ambush sites, revolvers in handbags, Lee Enfield's undercoats with the muzzle by your rear guns in prams, with teddy bears and dolls nestled in the blankets. A broken bar. And all of that was preferable to being at Mount Pleasant," Dudley Clark coaxed. Josephine turned to look at the man, one of 1,000 faces, showing her yet one more. ... Their broken bar at that housey broken bar. She turned to look out of the window again, ... Wasn't a broken bar pleasant? When they got on the express train at Waverley for London, Clark asks just one more question of the girl steeling herself up for the continent. "How good is your German?" Josephine turned from her quiet contemplation of the Yorkshire countryside and beamed a smile to Dudley Rangel Clark. "How good do you want it to be?" 88,888,888. April, 1943. The heavy iron gates of the general officers' quarters groaned open, and Sterling was shoved inside, the sound of his boots echoing like gunshots against the stone floor. The guards, surveying the dorm, gave one more glance at the frantic concealment of escape plans, then stalked away. Major Sterling was a sight to behold. A delay in the resumption of his place that morning had resulted in raw, disheveled violence. Regardless of Josephine's words, and Ethan had been seen heading to the castle's chapel. Sterling's torn tunic, split and weeping knuckles and blackened eyes was the answer to his own loss of temper. Not on his watch would O'Reilly allow one of his countrymen, countrywoman, be beaten by the oppressor. Where the officers' dormitory had been alive with the quiet, low hum of captured men, the air went dead as Sterling sprawled across the center of the room. The British officers, many of whom had been watching from the high windows, turned toward him. There was no welcome. Instead, cold, judgmental silence. It was Patreed who stepped forward, walking across to Sterling and crouched beside him, noting his bloodied hands. A broken bar. She was often in the chapel, just sitting. A young lieutenant, Charles Collins, approached her that morning, but she wouldn't turn her head. A broken bar. Protestant. A broken bar. Ethan would not turn her head, but she shook it. "You're not a Catholic, I tell." At this, the woman turned to him, her face swollen from a beating, her body trembling. "No," she'd said, simply. Then, pulling her jacket to her, she strode out of the door, her footsteps on the stone steps. A broken bar. "Word travels fast in Colditz, David," Reed said, his voice quiet but carrying a sharp edge. "You gave the Joyce woman a hiding that would have made a black and tan blush." He leaned forward, voicing the opinion of most. "A woman, Sterling, regardless of whose sister she is." Sterling didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled himself to his feet, walked to the center of the room, looming over the smaller men, his 6'6" presence filling the cramped quarters with a suffocating tension. "She's a collaborator and a murderess, Reed," he growled, the lie coating his tongue. Eve's survival diminished next to his loss of temper. "If you have a problem with how I handle traitors, Part a broken bar, Mick a broken bar, Douglas a broken bar." He nodded around the room, resting on the biggest promenade in the room. "You can take it up with me now." Lieutenant Collins sneered from the corner, getting up from his chair. "She's 5'2", Major." "It couldn't have been much of a fight. I saw her in the chapel this morning. I saw her face. A massacre, I'd say." Sterling turned on the boy with a speed that would make a peregrine falcon feel challenged. He grabbed Collins's sweater, pulling him close until they were nose to nose. "You think you know what a massacre looks like? You haven't seen a fraction of what that woman has done. She's got more blood on her hands than this entire room combined." As he shouted, the image of Paddy Mayne flashed behind his eyes, the wild, terrifying glare of the man who had torn apart German airfields with his bare hands, and Ethan's face replaced that of his comrade. He released the lieutenant, shoving him back. Whatever he might have done was aborted by the radio coming to life. Michael Sinclair, a former comrade of Sterling's, got up to intervene but, at the crackling, stopped. The loudspeakers whined with feedback, before the nasal, mocking tones of William Joyce filled the dorm, his voice dripping with aristocratic derision as he detailed British losses in the Atlantic. "Germany calling. Germany calling." Sterling stood still, his bloodied hands where he had fought off O'Neill's knife, clenching and unclenching. Every word from Lord Haw was a reminder of why he had to do it, and why he hated her. He could almost hear Ethan's voice layered over her brother's, mocking him for Eve, mocking him for his mercy. And now good Phantom Major tells of success for the Allies, Joyce taunted. "But for my sister, who knows the truth, we will just allow Major Sterling time to wallow in his disbelief. The radio game is real, sir, and we are, at last, picking up more and more troublemakers. Yvette has been of great help. you see?" Sterling spat, once the broadcast had come to an end, challenging the disgusted faces of his peers. "Listen to him," Sterling yelled over the broadcast, gesturing wildly at the speaker. "We don't rightly want to," came a voice, "only the Hun put the wireless on, you see. That's her blood." Sterling ploughed on. "That's her kin. If any of you want to play the gentleman for a Joyce, then you're in the wrong war." He turned his back on them, stalking toward a corner camp bed and collapsed onto it. He stared at the ceiling, his mind drifting back to the dark cell, the smell of her floral soap, and the way her eyes had stayed locked on his during the beating, annealed steel. Later that night, Lieutenant Collins approached Major Sterling's bed, from which he had not moved all evening. "It disturbed me to see a woman so beaten up, sir," Collins conceded. "She ran from me, in the chapel." "You probably pricked her conscience," Sterling moaned, through dry, cracked lips. Charles Collins swallowed, and sat down on the floor beside David Sterling. In her haste, she dropped this broken bar. "I don't think she meant to." Sterling opened one eye, the better one, which hadn't succumbed as much to O'Reilly hitting him. "What is it?" he managed. Collins handed him a scrap of paper. On it were 6 digits. Sterling stared at it, and then squinted his good eye at Collins. "A phone number, perhaps. Her botch sweetheart or something." But Collins was shaking his head. "I don't think so, sir," he continued, then turned and beckoned another lieutenant over to them. "Bob, that is Lieutenant Saunders. Can read map coordinates, memorizes them." "I had to, sir," Bob Saunders interjected. "When I flew in the Spitfire crew in August A40, we had to know. Get to the bloody point." Sterling snapped. "Bob," Collins continued, "knows the coordinates of every place in France, and he verified it with Bader, who also was a navigator." "I know he was once a navigator." "Collins, get to the bloody point." "Sir, it's a place called Moussy, in France, in the east, in some mountains." "Does that place mean anything to you?" Collins looked at the major with anticipation. David Sterling sat up in a semi-recumbent position, eyeing the 2 lieutenants. He snarled a laugh, and peered at the numbers again. "Moussy, you say?" "In the Vosges Mountains, sir," Collins added expectantly. "No," Sterling replied, dejectedly, shaking his head as the belief he had once had in his head began to unravel. "Number. I have never heard of Moussy." 888,888,888. April, 1943. The door to the cell creaked open. The pale light of the hallway caught the silhouette of Othniel. Ledger in hand, she had asked for O'Reilly to bring Sterling to the interrogation room, and now, a single, lit cigarette in hand, she sat across from Sterling. "You're holding back, Major," she said, inhaling. "The timing for the Sicily drop is wrong. My brother's broadcast tonight needs the truth, or the Abwehr will start wondering why their star is failing." Sterling leaned back, a ghost of a smirk playing on his gaunt face. He felt a crystalline disgust in his gut, which was a sort of twisted power. She could have planted the coordinates. "Of course. You think you're the one holding the leash, Othniel?" Sterling asked, using her full name. "You think you and your brother are the architects of this game? You're nothing. Germany own this, late though it is to the empire-building game." Josephine paused, her pen hovering over the ledger's page. "We are the ones winning, Major Sterling. Your SAS are fractured, gone, after Malta and Crete. Major Maine is chasing his own tail in the Mediterranean because of the leaks William has provided." "Major Maine?" The words came out before Sterling could stop them. Josephine, as Ithn, smirked. "Besides, Eve is alive and well in London. She missed your death warrant. You merely killed innocent postal workers." Josephine's eyes narrowed. "Mansour is 11th desk officer, a free French traitor. While you were busy extracting secrets with her on her back, she was selling the coordinates for Moussy. She sold the lives of 140 villagers, and mine and Druce's locations to the SS to buy Berno Enfields and Messerschmitts for Algerian nationalists." Josephine stood up so violently the chair screeched against the stone. She knew knew he had wound her up. But he didn't look triumphant, and she had named her co-operative. Sterling saw it then, the shadow of Moosey behind her eyes. He had assumed she was a true believer, a cold Republican intellectual. He hadn't realized her being there was the truth. Behind him, Josephine started the desk fan, putting it on the highest setting to drown out her words. "I was in the barn, Sterling," she rasped, her hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table until her knuckles turned white. I was side by side with Captain Henry Druce when the trees exploded. I watched the villagers I had promised to protect, women and children too, get herded out into the rain and the mud, off to the German border, because our codes had been compromised. Sterling froze, saying nothing. He tried not to look at her face that he'd broken, he tried instead to focus on something else. But Josephine's words had caustic in them, and penetrated his conscious mind regardless. "When the SS dragged me out of that barn," she continued, her voice trembling with a decade of suppressed fury, "I had two choices, a piano wire noose for SO activities in the SD headquarters, or do a deal. I told them my Irish connections I traded on my name. I told them I was William Joyce's sister. I told them I was more useful as a collaborator than a corpse." She leaned over the table, her face inches from his, about to strike him, beat him for the beating he had given her, beat some sense into him. Her mind instead turned to Bill Sterling. She had felt safety there, with him, like being inside a children's book. Beside them, the fan seemed louder. "I didn't choose this life because I loved the Reich, Sterling," she lied, banishing all thoughts of David's brother. "I chose it to stay alive. And all this time, I thought it was some brilliant German cryptographer who broke us at Moosey. I thought we were out-soldiered." Her eyes flared with a sudden, murderous light. "To find out it was her, selling us for Algerian firepower. To find out she traded my life and Druce's sanity for an arms deal." A broken bar. Josephine turned her head. "I still don't know whether he got out. I hope he did. He was the best of us." The silence that followed was heavy with a mutual, devastating realization. They were both victims of the same person. Sterling had been betrayed by love. Josephine had been betrayed into a life of treason. "She died," Sterling reminded her, his voice a flat, terrifying monotone. "Died in a crash that you caused." "Funny," snapped back Josephine, "because the letter you read out seemed pretty bloody real to me." Took her secrets to the sand. A broken bar left us both in KGs. A broken bar. You're in a German uniform. A broken bar. I'm in a German cell. A broken bar. I remember the Fibel. A broken bar. Sterling stared at her. "That I caused." She paced past her chair. With plastic explosive by the fuel line. Josephine stared back. "She went down because I wanted her to." Broken bar. Across the table, Sterling gripped her forearms and shook her. Josephine struggled and got free. "It's what you've done to traitors. Men have died for less by your hand." But it was Eve. He loved her, had loved her. A broken bar. "Tell her to put it on the air," Sterling said, simply. Josephine didn't look back. She smashed at the fan's control to turn it off. It wobbled on its stand and whined to a standstill as she walked to the door, her silhouette trembling in the pale light of the hallway. Josephine was about to turn back, and place the little rock from her pocket onto the table in front of him. "We went to Edinburgh Castle." A broken bar. David. A broken bar. "Well, a broken bar." He clambered down the rock face. "Of course he did." "A broken bar. We didn't realize until we got back. He had brought with him some kind of rock from the volcano the castle sits on, a type of basalt the guild told you. "A broken bar." "A broken bar." Heaven knows why he kept it. "A broken bar." Instead, she curled her hand around it, a talisman, a good luck charm, its pink and beige crystals hiding within her fist within her pocket. "Just keep them coming, and you'll be the Pirate King before the week is out. I take it you like the dorm?" Josephine turned to go, not caring to hear the answer. But Sterling had paced to the door, filling it, demanding to be heard. "What is your name, sister of Joyce?" he shouted down the corridor. It was enough to bring Josephine back to the doorway. They stood face to face, neither conceding position. "Ethan O'Neill," Josephine told him. "Your real name?" he insisted. He grabbed her lapel. She shifted her hand, and the stone came out onto the floor. Josephine, she traded, so he would let her go and she could pick it back up again. Bill had let her keep it, even though it belonged to David Sterling, or Edinburgh Castle, by rights. The move to the dorms had been a disaster. Sterling's reputation preceded him, but his actions had isolated him from his peers. Eve was alive, but he could not rejoice in her being alive, nor hoping to see her again if what the lieutenants had told him, which seemingly confirmed the information that Ethan, Josephine, had conceded, and the escape plan that he had grafted himself onto, with Pat Reed, had fallen in, literally. The German guards had been tipped off, not by Josephine, but by a nervous informant within the ranks. The raid was swift. The escape tunnel was collapsed in even more to get the escapees out and back to the dorm. Sterling was dragged back to the solitary cell, his face a map of fresh bruises. But he wasn't the only one bleeding. Late that night, the heavy bolt of the solitary cell slid back with a jagged, uneven rhythm. Josephine stumbled in. She didn't have her lantern, she carried only a guttering candle. Her uniform, usually a suit of armor, was unbuttoned at the throat, and her cap gone. Sterling sat up in the darkness, his eyes narrowing. Back to gloat. The dorms were a trap. Josephine, your gift nearly cost me my life. She didn't answer. She leaned against the damp stone wall, her breath hitching in the dark. As she moved the candle closer, the light caught her face. Her lip was split, and her left eye was swelling shooter, a deep, mottled purple that spoke of a heavy ring and a heavier hand than he had ever laid on her. Sterling's contempt cooled into a sharp, cold focus. He knew that look. It wasn't the work of a common guard. Who did it? The guest of honor arrived this evening, she whispered, her voice thick. William. He wasn't pleased with my failure to turn you. He thinks I'm soft. He thinks I've spent too much time away from the family values of the Reich. Sterling stood, his tall frame uncoiling from the floor. He did this to his own sister? What brother would do that? Not my other brother. She reveled in his look of momentary confusion. Same mother, different fathers, she corrected, a bitter laugh escaping her lungs. Blood is a messy business. One brother is a traitor on the radio, the other, well, a broken bar. He's fighting for king, country and the Allies. I'm just glad Mosley wasn't with him. Josephine shuddered. She had run from Cable Street to be away from Oswald Mosley. Josephine looked down at the candle flame. I'm so, David. I've been in deep for nearly years. I killed, or rather I tried to kill, Eve Mansour because she was the source of the Funkspiel. She was the leak that would have led the Germans straight to my brother, and the rest of your men. I had to choose, his life, or hers. I chose my other brother. I chose the so who had got into this like I did. A broken bar Jack, a broken bar Henry, a broken bar Mary, a broken bar Vera, a broken bar Sonja, a broken bar Adetea, a broken bar Liliana, a broken bar Diana, a broken bar, all dead, because of her. He didn't move to strike her. Instead, he reached out, his hand hovering near her bruised temple before finally settling against her matted hair, tenderness unthinkable even that afternoon. You're more ruthless, your quizzling brother, Sterling said, quietly. I'm a Joyce, she spat, pulling away from his hand. She reached into her tunic and pressed a heavy iron key, the master for the East Guardhouse, into his palm. Whatever happened that made your escape attempt fail has prompted a coup. William is staying in Prum's quarters tonight. He's going to call for your public punishment. She raised a hand to her face. You need to be gone before dawn. Sterling took her hand quickly, pressing the key back into it. If I go, what will he try to do? I've got friends here, broken bar allies. At least. He won't be here long before he has to get back to Berlin. Get out, Sterling, for my sake, for my other brother's sake, and all those fighting those in this axis of power. I'm sorry that, he began, but stopped when he saw the expression in Josephine's face. Leave me. It was my own fault for coming here. Save your pity. She turned to go, then stopped. Oh, and if you must know, someone very close to you saved my life in prison. She fumbled around in her pocket, and found the basalt. He said I should give this to you. Josephine lied. Then, she stalked away, leaving the solitary cell open. She would have to escape now too. and the SAS training chided her for not having a plan to hand. Instead, she went to the chapel, to pray to a god she didn't believe in for a miracle that couldn't happen.